we're always nudging folks and pushing folks. And this will have a particular importance with what's going on right now. We're going to reframe, not necessarily, talk about the uncertainty in the world, but there's a lot of headlines, a lot of uncertainty. We're going to reframe, and we want you to get on the offense. And it's a really great time to get on the offense because we think that you need to ask for more from your supporters, your sponsors, your committee, your board, and yourself right now. And that's what we're talking about today. So thanks everybody so much for tuning in. And appreciate it. But let's talk about asking for more. Let's talk about asking for more and talk about what that means right now. You want to kind of kick us off a little bit on that, Jay?
I want to kind of, I think, part of this is, you mentioned it too, kind of the attitude around all this uncertainty. Is it really uncertainty or is it just noise? And the first thing that we've got to do is cut through all the noise, because if you're in the nonprofit space, if you're raising money and you're doing this, you're hearing all these things and hearing all this stuff. And guess what? It gets to be kind of an echo chamber, and you hear all these things and hearing it over and over again. And first thing, you've got to put some you have to put some mufflers on your ears where you just filter some of this out and just stop listening to it. I want to give you something. We talked about this the other day, and I made this comment. I said, during the Great Depression, there was 25, that's kind of what everybody thinks about when it was really, really bad, was the Great Depression, was 25% unemployment. 75% of the population was still employed. Mm-hmm. 75% of the people still had an income. 75% of the people still were making wages and doing that. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a terrible thing. I have great grandparents and grandparents that lived through that. It's been a long time ago, and we've all know there's been tough times that have come and those things happen, and economic hardship. I'm not trying to display that or put it down, but in all those times, there's still money out there and there's still people that want to help. I've been through three. I'm old enough that I've been through three significant economic downturns. And in those three times, guess what? Nonprofits did not all go away. They kept raising money. They continued to set records, some of them. They continued to fulfill their missions because people continued to give. And one of the things that I found is really interesting is sometimes in the fundraising world, we tend to take what's going on around us and we wear that as this robe. We put this robe of, I don't want to say defeat, but
this cloak of uncertainty.
Gosh, it's all this stuff. One of the things I think is real interesting, we just came through 5 years ago. We talk about this all the time. Through COVID. Yeah. Really tough. On some people, it was an economic devastation, but there were some people that made more money than they'd ever made in their life. I'm talking about like corporate people that could give at a corporate level, people that had money, made more money than they'd ever made before. Raised tons of money. And guess what they did? They were willing to give it. But what happened is a lot of people were saying, well, I don't want to ask. Things are bad. I'm like, well, why? I was talking to a really good friend of mine that's a nonprofit professional fundraiser. And I said, well, why? Why don't you want to ask them? I said, there's some people around here that are making more money they've ever made before. You think they'll continue to give or give more? Mm-hmm. But because of where she personally, the attitude was. And so that's where this comes from. This whole idea of asking for more is because if you do not ask, it ain't going to happen.
Right.
Nobody's going to knock your door and go, hey, I know I've been giving you 5,000 for the last few years, but I just feel like I'm going to give you 50 this year. I'm not saying it can't happen because it does, but as a general rule, they're going to go, okay, 5,000. Well, and that's what happens. We go, well, they gave 5,000 last year. What's their capacity? And I think that we have to start really asking ourselves, what is our goal? What do we need to do? What do we need to ask for? And what is the math? One of my favorite stories, and it's been several years ago, and my wife asked me, she goes, who was that? And I said, I've tried to go through my email and tried to figure out exactly, because I was going to bring her on and say, tell us the story, but I can't seem to find it. But there was a young lady I was working with. I think she was like in North Carolina or something. And she was raising money. And I said, well, I was coaching her. And I said, what's the most you've ever asked for? And she said, 15,000. Or no, what it was 25,000. I said, what's the most you ever raised? 15. I said, why don't you raise it to 50,000? She goes, well, but I've never raised that. I said, but what's it going to hurt? Mm-hmm. What does it hurt to ask for more? You're already getting no, but who knows? Maybe it's just going to change. It's going to change something. Maybe it's going to shake something up and put you in, She called me back and nearly had tears in her eyes because she said, not only did I get a 50,000, but I got two people at 25, $100,000 change because she was willing to ask for more. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's a magic thing and it's going to happen because she worked really hard to do it. I mean, there was a lot of effort that went into that, but because she had the courage to ask.
It takes a lot of courage
and tenacity to do that.
Yeah.
And because she had to deal just to make that ask, people responded. And, kind of the way things happen, let me give you two examples. One, she got on the radar of a group that had been kind of watching them, but they just didn't feel like they were big enough to fit their mission and what their giving profile. But when they went to 50,000, it was like, oh, this is kind of in our deal where we want to make an impact. The second one was, there was a guy that had been the $15,000 donor, but he said, I just can't ever be the top deal. It's just a thing. I can't be number one. I'll do the level below.
Yeah.
And that's what she discovered. So whenever it went up to 50, he gave it 25. And then they had somebody else that came along because they saw this guy giving more. And they said, you know what, if he's going to do it, I'll give it too. And so it just all meshed together, but it created this thing because she was willing to be courageous and do that. And so I think what, this whole thing for us, and we'll be real specific on some things. And I want to get Sandy's take on this too, because she has a tremendous amount of experience as well. But the biggest thing that we have here is that sometimes we limit ourselves on what we do. We decide we magically have this ability to read someone's mind and decide what they're going to do without ever asking them. We didn't ever ask them. We didn't talk to them. We didn't do any research. We didn't make a phone call. We didn't text their friend. We didn't call maybe somebody who knows them. Nothing. We just decided that Sandy can't give any more than what she's done.
It's tragic.
Or she won't do it.
It's tragic that we do that.
And it's funny because whenever you say it, you kind of go, well,
that was silly.
It makes sense, but it happens all the time. I talked to another friend of mine that's a fundraiser, been doing it for over 2 decades, almost 3. And she said one day, she goes, you know what? I've just forgot. She goes, I used to ask big all the time. I forgot how to ask big, how to think big.
Fundamentals.
And the difference between the people that raise millions and the people that raise thousands, they're all good works. Their missions are just as worthy. But it's simply that they have decided we're going to think big and we're going to ask big and we're not going to be afraid. We're going to have courage. And let me tell you something. Courage, and and I love this. And if I could play the clip, I would. But Brene Brown has a whole speech on this. And she said, courage without fear is not courage. You have to have fear to be courageous. And I know there's fear. You may say, well, I'm not scared of anything, but there's some trepidation, some fear of rejection, whether it's personal, it doesn't matter, but there's something. Right. So this is a time to be courageous. So I just want to encourage you because we talk to, hundreds of people all over the country all the time who do this. And Sandy, am I wrong?
No. And you're absolutely right. And I think that one of the things that can take a little bit of that fear away is really knowing the donor, right? There's a huge difference between knowing about someone and actually knowing them. So when you're leading with questions and trying to figure out their why and why they're supporting your organization as opposed to someone else, or in addition to another organization, and finding out, well, what do you like about working with them? What is it that draws you to them? And now you can start piecing this, profile, if you would, together about who this person is. And by the time, and if you do that over months and over time, by the time you get to the ask, it's going to feel much more natural. Hey, I know that you said you were interested in this program. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your impact, how you've already impacted it. And then let's talk about how you can, have more of an impact.
Sandy raised money for JDRF, formerly JDRF, for 18 years before she joined our team, before we're the lucky ones now. Yeah. But and you brought something up interesting. That person's in front of you because they already gave, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Typically, right? And we're talking, let's really focus on folks that have already given, because there's a lot of folks. And if you're starting from zero, sign up for a coaching session with Jason. We'll talk about getting you off and running, right? Or if you're new to the position, You have people that have given before, right? So you're getting in front of those people. I just think it's, and I want to hear some feedback from you, Sandy, about how you went about it. But that is a very underutilized approach. Is I see that you gave. I'd like to know more about why.
Why?
Like, what got you off the
100%.
couch? What made you say yes? What made you click on the button? What made you buy the golden ticket at the event? What made you buy the bid on the silent auction item at the event? Stuff like that. Talk about getting the weeds with that just a little bit, Sandy, about starting that conversation, because if you don't ask those questions, you'll never know.
Right. And have the questions in your head already, right? You go into this phone call or you go into a meeting, a coffee, something like that. Learn about them. You want to walk away from the conversation knowing who this person is, what makes them tick, and that's just going to, and then you want to share information on that specific thing. Are you, and you mentioned JDRF, are you interested in stem cell research? Then when I have something that comes out, I'll send you an article about that and say, hey, I thought about you. I know you're really interested in this, and send it, and this way, one, you're giving them the information, you're showing them their impact, and you're just getting to know. You have to know the person. You really do.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, relationship building.
Well, it's totally about relationship, and the way that you can start building that relationship, because it could be somebody that just showed up.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us haven't had an event? I can't tell you how many times I've over the years been at an event and the biggest buyer of the whole thing was somebody in the back row that nobody knew.
Yep.
But they just happened to have they had a great year. They sold a company, something happened, whatever, they were moved, they raised their hand, gave $10,000. And you go talk to them and they just said, I really just appreciate the message in doing that. But when you go and talk to them and you say, wow, thank you so much. This is what your 10 grand did. This is what this did. And you start sharing that with them. They're going to start opening up to you and telling you that information that Sandy's talking about, because that's what people are looking for. I literally, and it was Teresa who happens to be on here, and I'm so glad she is. I told this morning, I said, in the nonprofit space, when you make a donation, you're investing in that organization. You're making an investment. Yep. And I said, are you going to give their money back? He said, nope, we're not going to give their money back. Of course we're not, because it was a donation. But the donor still is seeking a return on investment.
Validation.
They still want a return. And that return on investment is emotional. Right. It's an emotional to know that the dollars that I gave, the donation that I made, doesn't matter if it's $10 or 10 million, it's still the same feeling. Okay. And that's one thing it's very specific. That feeling is still the same, to know that whatever that was, that it did something. My daughter, many years ago, talked to me about how she donated $20 to some deal where a dog was born with a puppy was born with feet upside down, and she donated $20 to this puppy so they could do surgery to fix its feet. And she talked about how, oh my gosh, yeah, Dad, we get they send us texts and they said, here's an update on how Charlie got his feet fixed, and here's the deal, and look at him, he's playing, and all that stuff. They were giving a return on investment to the people that had invested in that little puppy. Yeah. It's no different. We all have a puppy. Okay. It may not actually be a puppy, but we've got a cause. We've got a mission. We've got something that we've done that's impacted the society that we live in, our community, maybe, hopefully, and to do that. And people want to know. They would love to hear that, because what happens is so many times where we make mistakes, and I'll stop going down a rabbit hole, is we start saying, oh, well, you know what? Sandy gave us some money. Let's hit her up again. And we think of them, they're just an ATM machine. Well, when you treat people like an ATM machine, sometimes your code's not going to work.
That ATM machine is going to run out of money.
It's going to run out of money.
Yeah.
But when we treat them like a person, then we do have access.
Yeah,
and we have access to it. And another friend of ours who's a recently retired CEO, and she talked about it. She said, if I had on speed dial 10 people that if I needed $10,000 like this, I could call them. And they would just write the check. But because she had developed those relationships over 10 years,
right.
Yeah.
And they had this relationship with the organization that they knew, number one, that they would never be abused. Number two, they completely believed in. They were completely sold out to the mission, and they had capacity to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where, sharing what you're doing is how you can ask for more.
Mm-hmm. Here's the other thing too, is, in addition to sharing what you're already doing and what impact they've already have, what's the vision?
Yeah.
what's the future, right? What's the need? We
Now,
need
we
to
like to say, this is, last year we helped 100 kids go to camp. This year we're going to help 150. Next year we're going to help 200. It costs $1,000 per kid to go to camp. How many kids would you like to help?
Yeah.
I know that you
Right.
helped
And
5
so-
kids. I know you sent 5 kids to camp last year.
That's
This
it.
year, would you be willing to send 10 or 20?
I was just going to say, that to tweak the we or we as an organization, right? We as an organization did this and you helped. No, you did this, right?
That's
You
it,
said,
yeah.
and you said it there in the last piece of that.
Oh,
is
you reframed it.
You, yeah,
Oh, wow, it's
it's
so
you
good.
language, right?
Yeah.
Because of you,
Yeah.
5 kids went to camp.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
help 10 go to camp next year?
And I
The
think
you
that
language
sometimes
is
that we miss on something really critical in that ask. And I'm not just talking about, people have capacity to give. And when they feel like, it's kind of like when they get a hot stock tip, what do? They invest more. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving them a hot stock tip. It's a hot giving tip.
Mm-hmm.
This hot opportunity to really get some return on investment. You helped 5 kids go to camp last year. How many kids would you like to go would you be willing to help this year?
Yeah. I love that. I love that reframing of it.
I'm an open-ended guy. A lot of times people will specifically put, and I think there's arguments, and I'd love to hear Sandy's take on this. I'm not a guy that's going to go ask somebody for a specific amount. If I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask for something so crazy that they're going to chuckle. Okay.
They'll bring you back down to earth. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I don't want to put a lid on it. And I'll give you an example. I asked a guy for 20, because I said, for 25,000 one year. Guy raised his hand. After the event, exactly, this is because he goes to the CEO goes to him and says, "Thank you so much. Really appreciate you stepping up." And he goes, "Hell, if Jason would have asked me for more, I'd have given more."
Yeah.
That's what the guy said.
Yeah.
Because when I said, "Hey, thanks for showing up and showing out," and he said, "I'm just too old and too rich."
Jason,
and he liked it. I mean, he liked the notoriety of it and everything. He's a great guy. But the point was, his ability to give was substantial.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to put a lid on that because, there's just so many things. Another example, a friend of ours goes in to make an ask to this guy, and he's looking to ask for a $50,000 commitment for 5 years. So $250,000. Walks in the door. Guy says, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, before we get started, let me just tell you, I've got a lot of stuff going on. My wife's on me. We've got commitments out the rear end." He said, "I got all these things going on. I'm not going to be able to do what I wanted to do, what my intention was." Well, our buddy Casey's mind, he was thinking, well, maybe they'll do 25,000. He said, "Thankfully, I kept my mouth shut because the guy said, I'm going to start out at 100,000 a year. I'll commit to that for 5. Let's come back next year and maybe things are a little better and I can give more."
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you something, Jason. So,
gift.
Yeah. And so let's frame it in an event space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure everyone, people on this call may have events. And so they may be doing a paddle raise, right? A fund to meet during where do you start it? Because
this is hotly debated upon auctioneers and people around and different folks because everybody's afraid of silence. Number one, I've never been afraid of silence in my life. In fact, I kind of like it because it kind of puts pressure.
Okay.
Like, let's just try something real quick. I'm going to hold up just for 5 seconds.
I don't like it.
Don't say anything.
Trevor, you and I were like,
ready?
We're
Let's
very
just try it
similar.
real quick, but just think about it. Just 5 seconds. It really kind of feels like I got to fill the space.
Yeah.
Got to fill the space.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. That's a pressure point in my mind.
Yeah.
So where do I start off? I'm kind of out there. I'm going to start off, who here would like to do something really impressive tonight? And I've got a guy I know that was an auctioneer, and he did that. He said, who'd give $50,000? I think the most they'd ever gotten was 10.
Wow.
But he held it, and he didn't stop, and he didn't go, who'd give 50,000? Okay, who'll give 25? Who 10, 5? He didn't do that. He said, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about, the mission. And he went on and talked about the mission. And he said, I just think that there's somebody here tonight that has the ability. This is not going to change your life, but you have the ability to change other people's lives. Lady raises her hand at $50,000.
And the ballroom went crazy.
And the ballroom goes bananas.
It was
And
the
here's the
ballroom
best
magic.
part. Then she stood up, pointed across the room at her ex-husband and said, Bill, you know you got the money. You can do it too. And he did. And instantly, because this guy he was just willing to hold it, to ask. Now, we knew that there was people in the room that had capacity.
Right. You knew that there was capacity in the room.
And I talked to him after and I said, it was obvious. I mean, he went for a little bit before he didn't back down. And I said, he just said, I just decided to go for it. He goes, I knew they had the capacity and I knew if I could just hold out long enough and didn't, before everybody went crazy on me, he goes, I just really felt that we would have somebody make that move. And they did, because he knew that there were people that could write a $50,000 check and not miss it. It didn't change anything in their lives. And that's what you've got to understand, that there are people that can write a check for 10 grand and not miss it. Mm-hmm. I can write a check for 10 grand, but I'm darn sure going to miss it. There's going to be a hole. Okay.
We promised we'd get specific about this. Let's talk about that for the board. Let's talk about that for the committee. Let's talk about that for getting those pre-committed dollars, maybe a pre-commitment before the fund of need at an event.
Sure.
I love where Sandy's going with that. But let's give folks, you said $10,000 and not miss it, so I know exactly where you're going because I know you will. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what that means for asking more out of your board, your committee, volunteers, and that before the event, for instance.
Well, one thing, you've got to start from day one. Okay.
What does that mean?
Now, you've got to start from day one in everything that you do to understand that way everybody on your team understands what they're doing. Number one, everybody's got to be able to say what the mission is in 10 words or less. The reason that boards and committees do not ask for money is because they don't know what to say. Number one, because guess what? If you did a test on everybody, there'll be a 98% call reluctance on most people. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what it is. If I knew what it was, I'd come up with a remedy and we'd all get rich. But the thing is, most people just don't want to make a call because it's a fear of rejection. They feel weird asking for money. I don't want them to feel like I'm begging. And it's none of that. Right. But it's because the way that they've been taught to ask. They've never been taught. Most people don't know. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to make something up, so just bear with me for just a second. Hey, Trevor, it's Jason. Hey, I'm on the board for ABC Charity. We send kids with cancer to camp, and I know that you love kids. I know you do that, brother. I appreciate you, all that kind of stuff that you do. But look, we've got an event coming up. It's going to be in August, and I'd really like for you and Shelby to get some of your friends and come and help us support us. You've been such a great supporter for other stuff that I've been a part of, and I know that you can. I know you care, and I'd like to really get you in the door. Okay. You notice what I didn't do. I just asked him to be a part of it. I didn't talk about money. I didn't talk about any of that stuff because I just want to get the guy interested. I just want to start a conversation.
Right. I used to have a little piece of paper. I just took a piece of paper and jotted a quote down, and I had it on my desk for years. And it said, "You are not asking for money. You are inviting them to be part of something meaningful."
That's right.
And I had that sitting in my cubicle, sitting there, and that's where it lived. And I looked at it every day, and it's true. I mean, it's true. You are inviting them to be part of a mission, changing lives. And that's what you're doing. You're not asking for money. You're asking them to be part of that. Exactly.
And I think that's where, we get caught up in asking in boards. Oh, we got to go ask for money. can't get my board to ask for money. Then stop asking them to ask for money. Start asking just to invite people to the event.
Mm-hmm. And then furthermore, tell them what to say. Get, like you were talking about messaging, give them the cheat sheet, so to speak. Write it for them. Make it easy. Make it so
your simple. Mission. You may have a really big mission. Okay, it may be broad. You may have 37 different pieces of your services that you do, but you got to get it just distilled down, and everybody can. I've yet to have somebody give me one that I couldn't get it down to 10 words or less, and I promise you can. I promise you can. And once you get your board. The way to get your board engaged is, first of all, to get real with them. Mm-hmm. That, they have a fiduciary duty to the organization. They have a legal duty to that. Now, that kind of freaks some people out because I've said, does everybody understand that if this place goes bankrupt or gets sued, you guys are on the hook for it? And they go, oh, wait, I don't know. What do you mean? Well, you are. You're on the hook. You have a financial responsibility to this organization to see that it keeps going.
Wow.
That's not to scare you and freak you out, because there's E&O insurance and all that. I'm not trying to get into legalese of everything. But what I'm saying is there's a duty to do that. That's what board members are there for.
Yeah.
Oversight happens, yes, and to help with some stuff, yes. But really, they're there to raise money. Mm-hmm. Hire and fire the CEO and raise money. That's really what they're there to do.
Yeah. Ryan, I love that point. As a startup founder, I did this with a recent event, sent on a draft to the board to send around. Nobody was engaged, so I basically fired them all and invited a few to reapply. I love that. That is courageous of you, Ryan. I love that. Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. Finish your thought, Trevor.
I would say we're always talking to people like, you have to have that uncomfortable conversation if they're not engaged. But I will also say this once again, giving folks the missions marketing messages, we call it 10 words or less. I spoke to an expert that said we do it in 8 words or less. I was like, holy smokes, what's going to come out? 7-minute abs is like the next thing or whatever, right? You know what I mean? But it was a really thought-provoking conversation. What was also very interesting, I had another conversation with Julie Ordonez recently where she was talking about folks that are new to the board. And you can also apply this to like a new $10,000 level giver that you just identified at an event, for instance, or what have you. And she said her podcast is great. It's called The Courage Lab. So she's very courageous. And she sat in that seat, right? So, and she said, when I talk to someone, first I talk to them first by saying thank you, right? Okay. But early and often, I think this is another thing that we could touch on too, about laying the groundwork for what asking for more looks like. And she says, when I meet a new $10,000 level donor, or we add someone new to the board, I tell them exactly what I'm going to be asking for. I don't tell them necessarily when I'm going to do it, but she says, I tell them I'm going to ask you for everything. I'm going to ask for you to give $10,000 again at some point when it matters. I'm going to ask you to open up your home so we can have a sponsor event or use it as an auction item for a buy-in item or what have you in the live or anything. And she lays it out early and often. Yeah. And I think that helps with expectation. We mentioned Brene Brown. I've been waiting to say this. It's very interesting because no news is not good news. That's for sure, right? In your personal life, in your fundraising career, in any path, no news is not good news. You said Brene Brown about courage, and it's not courageous if there isn't fear. Well, fear and nerves means you care, number one. So that's amazing, right? Okay, we got that unlocked. Another famous Brene Brown quote is that in the absence of fact, which you could apply to information or contact, in the absence of fact, people will fill the void. And in fundraising, they will feel the void with inaction. If they feel like they're part of the horrible words, the donor cycle, if they feel like they're a part of that, and you're not picking up the phone and engaging them and asking and telling them where the impact was and telling what you did. I love how you frame that, Sandy. But if you're not doing it, they'll fill the void with something else, like another organization.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really good. But yeah, making sure that folks understand that and where the expectation lies.
I want to make something clear too. This whole thing about asking for more doesn't just apply to the ultra high wealthy, the big $10,000, $50,000 gifts.
Yeah.
It applies to the $20, the $25, the $50. Yes. We had a whole thing about recurring gifts, and an organization that this, a friend of ours, she was part of this organization, and over about 3 years, they took it from $100,000 a year in annual giving to almost $500,000. Yeah. And she said, we just simply asked a question. We showed them what they did, what they were doing, and would you be willing to do a little bit more? And not, but they did ask for more. Yeah. And what they found was, I think she said it was an 80% take rate. That the respondents would come back with an increase of some kind. And they didn't say, here's 5 ways you can do it. This is what your gift is doing right now. And here's an opportunity for you to do more.
Mm-hmm.
Are you referring to Christy? Are you referring to Christy Jeffries?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Christy Jeffries, our friend?
Yeah, totally.
She also, I will say this too, because we're huge on gratitude, is she hand wrote 400 thank you notes when the recurring program reached 400 people. And she said, that was my max. Cause we've spoken.
Yeah. She said, we went over 400. She's
like, I couldn't handwrite. That's when I hit my, and she's like, we had to automate it a little bit. It was still very personal. And she said, once I hit, so that gives you an idea too about the engagement piece afterwards and whatnot. And she, of course, asked for more, and it was amazing. Yeah.
We used our copier. You said they had to automate some of it. We used our copier to make really great copies of a handwritten note from a kid.
Yeah.
And it was like beautiful, and so, there, if you get to that point where you need some help, but it's always nice to have people sit and do it.
I want to kind of change a little bit. I'm sure there's somebody who's going to hear this, watch this. And if you're seeing this as a recording, please give us any comments, anything down below. If you're actually here in person, make sure you stay to the end to win, because we're going to give something away.
Oh, yeah, great. And more questions, please, and comments. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Well, here at HGA Fundraising, we do have the most profitable auction items in fundraising. And
we're going to give one of those away.
We're going to give one away here in a little bit so somebody can raise more money. So we just want to point that out.
Whether you like your board or not, someone's leaving with one.
Yeah, one last week.
I've had people, they always say, well, where do I start? And I always ask, who's your biggest fan? Somebody goes, what do you mean by that? Well, who's giving you the most money? And they go, well, that's Miss Johnston. I said, how much money is she giving you? $5,000. Okay, perfect. That's who I'm going to go talk to. I go, what do you mean? What are you going to do? I'm going to go ask her for some money. And somebody goes, well, they've already given that. And this is literally what the executive director said. She goes, well, I don't know that I would do that. She just got through getting back from such and such, and they had a wedding in Belize. If she just put on a wedding for her daughter in Belize, she didn't spend her last nickel on it. I'm going to ask her for more. And I did. And somebody said, well, how do you ask her? I went over there and I said, hi. I said, I'm Jason. I said, I just want to thank you for everything that you've been doing for the organization. I'm going to ask you for some help. She goes, yeah, I'm happy to. I said, I'm going to ask for money here in a little bit. We're going to do it. This is a very small event. It's very quickly done. I said, I'm going to ask for money for pledges. Would you be willing to make a gift I could use to leverage the room to give more? And she goes, what you have in mind? I said, 100,000. And she started laughing. She said, we'll start with 1,000. I said, perfect. Mm-hmm. And by the time it was over with, she'd given another $6,000 in addition to that, plus had got everybody else to give us. And this was a very, very small, very, very quick event. And so my point is, of course, she's going to be willing to give more. In the for-profit world, if a company that's moving along and they need to go get some money, guess who the first people they go to? Their investors. Yeah. The top investors, they go talk to them first. You've got to do the same thing in the nonprofit, because they have the biggest stake in your success. They want to see you succeed. They don't want to see anything happen to they don't want to see, somebody left out. So when you need something, they're there. They believe. They're true believers already. Mm-hmm. And, they may not, maybe they don't give more money. Maybe they give you more time. Maybe they give you more contacts. Maybe they make an introduction to you.
That's another piece of asking for more and laying that out.
Yeah. Sandy, I can't, I'm tapped out. I don't have any more financially I can give, but let me tell you something. I'm going to introduce you to a guy, Trevor Nelson. I know he's got he would love this mission, and I'm going to make this introduction. In fact, I'm going to do it right now.
I was going to say that. Yeah. leverage, right? Your board. So we were all talking about how they have a fiduciary responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. But in these meetings, when you're going to ask other people, leverage your volunteers, leverage your biggest fans, and bring them along when it's appropriate, of course. Mm-hmm. When you're talking dollars and cents, you have to be cognizant of who's in the room and, who's really discussing how much money is being given. But when you can and when it makes sense, leverage those top supporters in these conversations.
Something to your point, Sandy, you just said something. I want to give you guys an example of something. People that have money can ask other people that have money, and it's a different ask. Yes. Okay. It's just different. Let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. Executive directors want to get a match challenge for the Fund a Need. And she went to ask a guy who was on the board, very wealthy. Okay. 3 money. All right. The guy's got a lot. And she said, hey, I'm going to make some names up. I'm going to ask Joe if he'll give a gift that we could challenge the room in the Fund a Need. Now, Joe had 2 money, big 2 money. Okay. He's worth about 800-900 million. And she's asking a guy that's worth $1 billion. And he goes, why didn't you ask me? She goes, well, I think I just did. He picks the phone up. Hey, Joe, we're in for 50. That was it. It was done.
Yeah.
So understand that when you've got people that have that ability, they can make, because it does get a little weird sometimes, I know, for people, but they can say those numbers and not think anything about it because they don't care if they're not going to worry about offending them because they already know they're rich. Okay. They know what kind of capacity they have if they're that close, and they know the fact that they can make that kind of a statement because it's kind of like I started off with saying, hey, Trevor, hey, brother, I know once you Shelby come to this event, I know you guys would love it. It's going to be a good time. It's a cause that you can get behind.
You're opening the door.
I'm opening the door because I may not, at that point, then maybe I'm going to bring in the big guns and bring Sandy in, and Sandy's going to sit down and say, well, Trevor, I'm so glad that you could be a part of this. I really appreciate that Jason got us connected. Where would you like to be at? What kind of impact would you like to have?
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation,
right. Open-ended,
because it's not about money. Because the people, regardless if they have lots of money or little money, it's still not about the money.
You only know these things and there's a recurring theme, of course, with the way we speak every week, it seems like too, right? You only know these things if you've taken the time to ask these questions and gotten to know the person I got to honestly, it's because it's kind of easy, right, to think about it this way, like on a friendship level.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in this together,
not about them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, gosh, it's just people don't take the time. Why is that? Why do people speed? Why do people speed and not take the time to get to know these people?
They have big goals, I feel. They have
They're always looking for the next new donor.
A lot on their shoulders. It's like, these folks are doing a lot. And so sometimes it's hard to stop down and say, okay, I need to spend a little more time with this person. Because it's new donors, but it's just all the work that goes into, putting on events if you're doing events, and it's a lot. They're tapped, they're tapped. And so
when you were doing that, when you were putting on events, when you were at JDRF, what would you do? Would you time block? Would it be seasonal? Would it be immediately after the last event? Like, talk about just some bullet points that folks can take away with how you can make sure that you get back to focusing on the relationships because of the value.
Definitely time blocking. That helps, right? If I'm going to spend, all day Friday hitting this list of people I need to reach out, but putting time on your calendar, we talk about it here too, put some time on your calendar for LinkedIn, put some time on your calendar for this, and so that's going to be important. It maybe 8:30 to 9:00 every morning, I'm sending out research updates, or, that type of thing. And I have this list of folks. I live by my task list. So much so that if I do something that's not on my to-do list, I write it and cross it out.
Yeah.
So I get the satisfaction. But, it's hard to, when you have so much to do. We did the checklist last week, right? And there's so many things to do. And that was only the auction portion of that, right? We were talking about, in the guise of events. That was the auction portion. What about the fund need? What about the logistics? That there's so many lines to that big, huge spreadsheet. It's a lot, So I would say you got to find a way to take things off your plate so that you can concentrate on the things that matter.
That was my follow-up question. You have to identify what your North Star is, what your big goal is, whether it's an event or a campaign or whatnot. And then you have to start if things don't fit in that silo, you have to cut out the administrative meeting that you really don't need to be in.
Exactly.
The program meeting that you really don't need to be in. Did you ever find yourself faced with those challenges where you're just like, hey, listen, I can't make it because I have to do this?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
How would you have that conversation?
Cut down as much as you can cut down on, it's sometimes it takes courage, right? Depending on who you're talking to, who you're trying to, relay this message. Sometimes it's difficult, but you really have to say, listen, I need to, we're trying to raise $1 million here. And in order to do that, I need to be in touch with these folks, these people in my portfolio or my list of donors. I need to be in touch with them XYZ, how many times? And this 3 hours of internal meetings is taking up a huge chunk of that time. Right. And so, there's definitely ways to cut down. I would say too, again, bring in as many people as you can. We talked about interns, right? We've been talking about interns, but interns can take things off your plate. Committees, functioning committees, right? We talked about, laying out expectations for your board members. That goes for your committees as well. Because I know there's a ton of committees out there that have 10 people listed and 5 people are whatever it is, soliciting donations, soliciting auction donations or whatever your committee's doing. And so you need to lay out that expectation when they come on. Like, this is what I'm going to need you to do. This is, we're going to have, regular check-ins. How are you doing? Do you have any challenges? Are you able to get to, because if you're not able to get what's on your list and to these donors that you're soliciting, then we need to make sure that that's being done. So you need to, it's an open, honest conversation. It really is.
And if you want to know how to do that, I'm going to give you, it's called the one thing. There's a difference between being busy and being productive. If your one thing is selling kids to camp, then that needs to be your focus. What I'm doing, is this going to help us send more kids to camp? It's a yes or no question. Mm-hmm. If it's no, then it goes to the bottom of the list. I get to it when I can. Because a lot of times the things that we think that we have to do, that's urgent, I've got this thing I got to do, it's not. To Sandy's point, this is not a needle mover. But if picking up the phone and I've got I'm committed to making 3 phone calls a day to reach out to donors, that is the thing that's going to move the needle. And when we go through our list and we start looking, and let me tell you something, there's not a nonprofit employee executive, and I'm going to specifically talk about executive directors and directors of development, the director level. There's not one that I've ever met that had too much time on their hands, ever. Didn't matter if it was a $50 million organization or a $50,000 organization, it's the same across the board. And so the difference between the ones that are 50,000 and the ones that are 50 million is one thing. They are focused on what the mission is, and they only do things that are going to forward the mission, and all the rest of it's just noise. Because you get into a deal where, I've got to call this person back. Well, do you have to call that person back? Because the only thing they're doing is calling about is because, it's somebody who didn't like the seating chart where Sandy put him down. And she's never given a nickel. She shows up, we give her, she gets a table because the company she works for is they do a minimum sponsorship and all that. Then, tell them you're not going to give them a table this year. We're going to have you underwrite something else. I mean, there's a lot of noise that happens, and you guys all know what I'm talking about because everybody's got a board member that's just wearing you out. Somebody's, the one that calls, got 70,000 ideas, but's never raised a nickel to put towards any one of them. So how do you deal with those? You deal with them having uncomfortable conversations, directly, doing those things at hard. That's the difference between the people that have these seemingly, they've got everything figured out. Oh, they're just working their butts off just as hard as you are. Yeah. The difference is what they're working on, and they're working on the stuff that matters. Right. They're working on having that relationship with the donor so they can't ask for more. They're having that relationship, with those vendors, those people that are out there working, those key employees with their board. One of the things I find that's just blows my mind is how little of a relationship executive directors have with their board. It's almost non-existent. It's like they all show up and have snacks and coffee once a month, and that's kind of it. And that's all the interaction that ever happens.
Not only should they have a relationship.
No wonder they don't want to do anything because you've not invested anything in them.
Yeah, yeah.
Your job as the executive director is to lead the organization, to inform the board so that way they can help you, assist you, and equip you. And you can't do that one meeting a month.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy?
Right. No, I was just going to say, and to add to that, not only should they have a very close relationship with the executive director, your board members should also know your staff and have relationships with your staff. Our board members, chaired our committee for our golf tournament, and we worked very closely together, and so those relationships need to be fostered as well.
No question.
I did something as a board member. I used to do something whenever I was on the board, because I knew I would always go. This was on for Heartline 211, and they would run the 211 hotline. when you can't call 911, call 211. And I would just go in there. Sometimes I'd bring them like donuts or something. And I would go in and just say, how are things going on? How are things? How are you guys doing? I'm not there I'm definitely not going to tell them what to do. I'm not making any suggestions. I'm not there trying to be the boss. I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just trying to encourage them and say, thank you. Mm-hmm. And, once that happens, and then, you go talk to the deal, but it's okay for you to invite your board members to do that, because some of them have no idea, because I didn't know that was something I could do.
I was just going to say, if you're an executive director, a founder, a development director, C-suite, you can tell your board members, hey, it'd be nice if you stopped in every now and again and gave, the program director and said hello to the folks at the controller, and just said, hey, what's up? People like that. Yeah. It's really okay if you say that, right? I mean, am I wrong?
Yeah. I mean, and with I think too, with any asks, right? To my point about having your board have relationships with other people on your staff, it may be that the executive director is not the right person to make an ask. It could be that board member has a better relationship, or a closer relationship. I shouldn't say better, a closer relationship with someone. I mean, I made an honoree ask, which is normally the executive director's, deal, but I had a very close relationship with the person that we were going to ask. And so I made the honoree ask, and he raised a ton of money. It was great. So, but the comfort level between myself and that board member or the honoree was there, and so you really have to figure out who owns the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. Who owns that overarching relationship, whether they are involved in, little pieces of the organization. You use what you have, use your assets, right? Yeah. Use your assets.
Yep.
I was always the person who, they brought in when there was a lapsed donor that they needed to, play to the, strengths, excuse me. And I was going to say strategy, to the, play to your team's strengths, and they were like, Sandy, we need, somebody to reach out to this lapsed donor. They haven't worked with us in 3 years. And so and then we had someone on staff who, handled upset people, upset donors, maybe if there was someone, so play to the strengths.
Part of asking.
I want to touch on something really quick, because we kind of mentioned that we were going to talk about some of this stuff, like how to ask for more out of your committees. One of the things that I've found the way to ask for more, to get more, is to be specific. So sometimes we want our board or committee to do more, but we don't really tell them what we want.
Yeah.
I need you guys get engaged. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just talk about phone and calling people. And let's say we're going to make phone calls and we're calling for people for a fundraiser. I've always liked the power of 3, because if I ask them for too much, but they've all got 10, 15 minutes a day, everybody has 10 or 15 minutes a day to make 3 phone calls. I didn't say 3 conversations, just 3 calls. If you have a conversation, great. You can leave a message, whatever, to do that. Because what happens is we sometimes over ask, or they overcommit. More times, what I found is boards and committees will overcommit to something because they're there in the moment. They're right there saying, yeah, I could do 20 calls a day.
Yeah.
They've never made 10 calls a day in their life, but they really love the mission. And so then they make this commitment. They're sitting there going, oh gosh, I just had 3 calls and I've got to make 17 more.
Yeah.
And I have a doctor's appointment.
Yeah. Exactly.
How am I going to do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, let's all, think about this, what we're asking for. And sometimes what we need to do is, especially when we're asking for time and effort, which is a big thing, because that's what boards and committees do really for the mission with the executive director. They give you bandwidth that you wouldn't normally have. 2.5 employees is the average FTE for a full-time employees for a nonprofit in the United States.
Yeah.
But yet I think the average board is 8.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, that's a big expansion, an exponential expansion of effort if we get all people on the same bandwidth. Any questions? We're talking away up here, talking about this stuff and asking each other.
We got a few more minutes. We got to give something away.
Yeah. Last call. Let's get any questions. We'd love to hit those.
We have a question about from Elizabeth. People are willing to give to programs that touch their hearts, but we need money for operating costs. Help.
Okay, so I do not believe in restricted giving. I think it is a mistake. I think that everything that we do, whenever I say to somebody and they say, let me give you an example. I ask this question every time I do a coaching call. I say, how many people did you serve? And let's just say how many kids did you send to camp? It's a great example. We send 100. How much money did you spend last year? 125,000. I'm making it up. All right. Or I mean, $1 million, 1.25 million. Okay. So we're sending 100 kids. It costs $1,000. I'm not sure if that math is working, but 125,000. Okay. So we have 125,000. So it costs $125 per kid. I put it all in there. I put salaries, rent, overhead, everything's got to go in that, because guess what? I know that you guys, people love and support what you're doing, but guess what? Love don't pay the bills. Okay. It takes money. So that's all part of the expense. And we get into this thing, only 6% of every dollar given, 6 cents goes to overhead. That's a bunch of malarkey. And that's the problem, is the way we ask and we do it, because we think it's a shortcut and a cheat code to get people to give us money. It's not. It's a short way to bad financial moves.
Outcome.
So
yeah.
My simple thing is I do that, and I ask for impact. If it costs us $1,000 to send a kid to camp, that means $1,000 is all in. We look, that's all in for everything. And that way, when they do that, I'm not saying something specific. I want to tie the impact to a human way that they can understand it and relate to it. Not to say, will you give us money so that way we can buy new tents for the kids? Will you give money so we can have some steaks for the tents for camping with kids? Will you be the one to supply? Okay, sure. Yeah. Everybody wants to supply the ice cream and the fun stuff and the cool things. But guess what? We still got to pay for the staff to go and do that. Well, how do we do that? Well, do you want to pay for a camp counselor? Well, I don't know. Maybe doesn't sound, but if I'm just sending a kid to camp and I've got it all in one. So that's how I advise people to deal with it. And I'm not talking, capital campaigns are completely different, building buildings and all that stuff. That's not my wheelhouse, but I can tell you, whenever you get your mission down and you say it, people never ask.
Right. What do you think of Ryan's response? I usually frame it as this. Thank you, by the way, Elizabeth, for sharing, and Ryan as well, and everyone that's shared today. I usually frame it as this gift will go to the area of greatest need. What do you think?
Because I think it's a BS answer.
Okay. Why?
Because you're trying to play on somebody's sympathy. And it's a short term. What's the greatest need? Well, the greatest needs, is I need to get paid.
Yeah.
What if the greatest need, Ryan, is that you need to be able to pay your rent? Yeah. What if the greatest need is payroll. I got to go do something, and see, it's subjective. Well, I gave to the greatest need that they had on June 5th, 2025 at 1:00 Central Standard Time.
Which was the utility bill.
But if you're, and you can tie your mission to a human need. I don't care if it's operating on puppies that are born with their feet upside down. That's what you're talking about. If it's animals, people, anything that you want to do. I talked to a group today. They deal with seniors and kids. And I said, sure. We assist children and seniors in West Philadelphia. That's all you have to say.
Fantastic.
That's it. You don't have to make this big thing. People will connect with what you're doing whenever you give them time, when you spend time with them, and so that's why whenever somebody goes, what's this going to go to? Well, if you say the area of greatest need, they're going to say, well, what's that today? How do you answer that? So you see what I mean? It's one of those things, because if somebody says, well, what we operate on puppy with upside down feet. Really? How many puppies are that? What's that? Well, you'd be surprised. Last year, we helped 100 puppies with feet that were born backwards. You know what I'm saying? You got to just really think about how I can do this and make it where it's going to be a lasting gift.
Yeah.
Because if I come back to them and they said, well, I really need your help. Now let me say this. And Ryan, I want to be real specific. There's a difference between something that's very specific, that is like, hey, we run a camp for kids and the roof just fell in. Okay. We got to go get a roof. That's different, because it's very specific. And then you're going to go ask people, say, hey, look, we got to get a roof on the camp for kids. So those are things that are different.
Yeah.
I hope that's helpful. And I hope this has been helpful for y'all today. Let's give something away. We ran over an hour. So I guess
we make the rules around here. We can go over an hour if we have to. Yes, okay. Ryan. Ryan, What are you raising money for? If you don't mind me asking.
Always bring it back to the mission.
Yeah.
Well, because all that overhead, if you really think about it, I mean, the overhead expenses are helping you get to your mission, right? They're helping you execute your mission. And so it's like every dollar goes to helping kids go to camp because you need the staff in order to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Good.
You need to keep the lights on in order to do that.
Let's get the deal. Let me pull this up real quick because we have got to get this thing rolling. And
we are going to text HGA to 73747. Do you going to do the giveaway today, Jay? You want to call the special winner? Do you want to call a special winner?
Sure. You do it. You're good at it.
Okay, I like doing it. All right, I'm just giving you a chance. Oh, Sandy, you don't get them. Okay, sorry. We'll make sure you get them and see you can have fun with it too.
I need a microphone too.
Free books for kids in underserved communities with poor reading scores. We're opening a free bookstore. That's beautiful, Ryan.
Okay, here's what you do: is how many kids did you serve? How many kids got books? That's all you do. It's always about the kids.
Yeah,
we help kids learn how to read. We read better. And last year we helped 50 kids. This year we're going to help 75. Next year we're going to help 100. And
wow, look at all these.
Always back to the kids.
Look at all these texts. Okay, last chance. Text HGA to 73747, and I'm going to call. What do you want to give away, Sandy?
Give away. Sandy. Let Sandy.
Oh,
yeah. We want to give away, Sandy.
We've given a couple golden tickets recently, right? So let's give away a Caribbean all-inclusive.
Love it.
Yeah.
Woohoo! No, I don't want to do that. I want to give away a Cabo all-inclusive. No, I'm just kidding. Let's give away a Caribbean all-inclusive. I'm going to call a lucky winner. Here I go. Okay. Random. Here I go. Make sure you answer because someone didn't answer. No one. The person didn't answer. I'm going to call it. That happened last week. All right, here I go.
Back. Yeah, turn your phone. Make sure you turn your phone on.
Okay, I'm going to give you. All right, I'm calling you, and here I go. Okay, here I go.
Turn your phones back on.
All right, I'm going to give you another shot. I don't know who you are. Nope. Okay, nope. It didn't go through. I feel like Dave Portnoy, like doing the pizza review. Nope, it didn't go through. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. All right, here I go. Random, here I go. Caribbean all-inclusive. Oh, we got a ringtone. Okay, great. Here we go.
Hold it up by the speaker.
Hello, yes. Good afternoon. Who am I speaking with?
This is Jake Adams.
Hey, Jake. Jake, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Thanks for tuning in, man. Yeah, appreciate you. Hey, you just won a Caribbean all-inclusive item that you. Yeah, Jake.
Amazing.
Jake, who are you working with?
The 5P Minus Society.
Far out. Okay, great. Well, can you use a Caribbean all-inclusive to raise money at the next event for the society?
Yeah, we have an event in September, and
Perfect.
This would be huge for us.
Come on.
Awesome.
Perfect, Jake. All right, well, we're going to reach out. Someone from our team will reach out with the collateral for the Caribbean all-inclusive. Can't thank you enough for coming on the webinar. I hope it was valuable to you today.
Absolutely. I've been on many, learn every time. You guys are awesome.
You rock. Well, thank you, Jake. All right, awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, hey, we keep giving
thanks so
away
much
more
for coming,
stuff.
Jake. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, see ya. Oh, that was
guys.
nice.
Everybody have a wonderful week.
Wow.
Thank you so much for spending time
Thanks,
with us.
Sandy. Thanks, Jay. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks, everybody, for sharing. We'll talk to you all soon. We'll see you next week. Hey, sorry, I got to plug the episode. Next week's going to be amazing. We're going to do the auction study with the gals from One Cause. They've come on the podcast before. They have a great webinar. Mm-hmm. Our friends Sarah and Carrie will be joining us from One Cause to talk about their auction study, the first one they've ever done. It's amazing, chock full of so much good data. You're going to want to tune in next Thursday, same time, same channel. We'll see you all there. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.